Alrighty, this is the next video in the Python tutorial series. We're going to start off by downloading the video, so we're going to go to our Canvas webpage here. We're going to go to our Files section for this class, and you can go to Python Notebooks. You click on that. Maybe there we go, loading. We're going to do Understanding Iterables, so you right-click on that file, save link as. Here we're going to navigate to where we installed our WinPython. So if you followed the tutorial videos earlier on, the first video I had you guys install it in program files. But if you installed it somewhere else, that's fine. Into your notebooks directory. And then I created a folder called Intro to Python, so we'll go ahead and put it in here. Save it here. And it renamed the spaces with plus signs. So when we come back over here now that we have to run this, come back to our home directory in my folder that I created. Let's see, there it is. So we'll go ahead and go off this one here. So now this video is Understanding Iterables, and there are two main types. There are sequences and there are mappings. Mappings are dictionaries. We covered those in the last lecture, but we'll probably focus more on tuples, lists, and sets for the statistics. Remember, sets can only contain one of a particular item, so you can't have duplicates in sets. Lists you can, and tuples can have duplicates as well, but remember the difference with tuples and lists are that tuples are immutable, which means they cannot be changed. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and create a new, we'll call it things. And this time we're going to create it as a set. So set uses the curly brackets. So we'll call this pen, paper, and let's see, what else do we need? Pencil, paper, glue. And if we add a duplicate, so we add another pen, we'll see what that does in a minute. Well, let's go over what a record, what the first set here. This is a tuple. So we're assigning this tuple that has a name, which is a string, a country code, and then a boolean and an integer type. Remember, they can contain different types inside tuples, so they don't have to all be the same data type. So you can have strings, booleans, and integers in the same thing. We have a variable name that we created called record. We are using the assignment operator. And we create a tuple using parentheses. And then anything where you see a hashtag is a comment. So anything from to the right of this hashtag will not be compiled when it's actually run or interpreted. So that's what's considered a comment. So anything to the right of a little hashtag means ignore. That's what it tells the thing to do, just ignore it. So now our next variable we created is colors. And this is what's called a Python list. And you can see that it's got square brackets on the two sides. And then it's a comma separated list of items. In this case, they're all strings. And then the thing we just created, things, is a set. And remember, sets cannot have duplicates. And we put a duplicate in there to see what will happen when we iterate over it. So we'll go ahead and Control Enter that. So now you can see that we actually ran it. Actually, let's go ahead and restart the kernel. Let's go ahead and restart and clear all the output. What that does is in here, it does a message in the Python to clear out all the existing variables that you've created, all the methods and the functions that you've created. Basically clears those all out so they haven't been run yet. So Control Enter there. This cell, we'll go ahead and Control Enter. You'll see now it starts with a number 1 since we restarted. And the last method we talked about looping with the for loop here. So we've got our for loop, which is a defined keyword in Python. And then we have the other defined keyword that they use in a for loop is the word in. So now the way you would read this, it says for item in record. Record we know is a tuple, which is an iterable item. So this is a variable name that we give it. So whatever we define here in the loop will be our individual records that are in this tuple. So it should iterate over all these different items and print them out. There you go. And if we change this to temp, we print out temp, it should do the same thing. Yep, I spelled right. There you go. So this is something we define inside the for loop here. This is something that we have to have created. But you can, so that's a of type tuple. This is of type list, and it does the exact same thing. So it iterates over the list and goes over every single item one by one. And we can actually go ahead and create a new cell. We'll copy this code, paste it in there, and we'll go ahead and use grab the variable things that we created. And you'll see that when we iterate over the set, it only does paper, pin, and glue, even though the set has 2 pins in it. And that's because sets can't hold 2 of the same item. So if it sees a duplicate, it just ignores it. So that's the difference between a set and a list. Okay, order matters. So remember, this is the comment here. So anything to the right of this means don't ignore for the interpreter, but this is just a note to say when we're trying to do a double equals, that's a Boolean comparison. So red, orange, yellow is different than yellow, orange, red. And again, with permutations, this would be equivalent of a permutation, but combinations, these would be considered the same. But when you're doing lists in Python, they're considered permutations, so that order does matter. And again, Python is zero-based indexed. So if we go to record, which is defined way up here, the 0th item is the first one here. So you might think that should be item 1, but it's actually item 0. And so this would be colors of 2 would actually be the 3rd color in the list. So if we get yellow is the 3rd one in the list. Let's go verify that. Red, orange, yellow. So yeah, yellow is the 3rd one. And then you can also index by the end of a list by using a -1. So basically your list goes to the end from 0 to, I don't know how many ever you have items, like 5. But if you do -1, it goes to the last item in the list. So we can go ahead and see that here. So that's violet. You go up here to violet. So you can go over the list in order. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or you can go -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. So for instance, if we did -3, we get blue. So you go -1, -2, -3. So you see that's blue. So you can iterate over the list forward or backwards. Now let's talk about mutable versus immutable data. Tuples, again, once they're created, they cannot be modified. So for instance, since we know record is mutable, is a tuple, it cannot be modified. So records of 0, you cannot assign something to that because that would be changing it. So we get an error. And you say the tuple object does not support item assignment, but colors are mutable, so you can change lists, not colors, but you can change the data type of list. So now you'll see yellow is the new assignment for the 0th item. With lists, you can do things like append to them, so you can add to the end of a list. You'll see that it adds the word orange to the end. You can extend multiple things. So basically you're extending 2 more items that are to the list. So it basically adds this list to the other list and concatenates the list. Whereas with tuple types, you cannot use append or extend. But if you use the extend method, you have to extend it with the same data type. Here, the data type, remember I talked about strings in the last video, how they're really arrays under the hood. So if you try to extend it with a string, you'll end up getting each individual letter because it thinks each individual letter is an array, or an item in an array. So you got to be careful when you're extending lists to make sure you have the same data type, so another type of list of strings. So lists have some cool properties. So go ahead and run this. So now we have a list of fruits, and you can count things like how many apples are in the list. So it goes through the list and counts them for you and gives you a summation of them. If something isn't in the list, it gives you a 0. You can also find the index of an item in a list by using it. Gives you the first index of the item. So if there's 3 bananas in there, it's only going to give you the first one in the list. So 0, 1, 2, 3, in that case, the first index of banana. List can also be reversed. That basically switches it from orange to banana, now it goes from banana to orange. You can append to the list like we did before, but you notice that it doesn't show here, right? That's because it doesn't actually do the assignment. It does it and it stores it in a temporary variable. So if you you'll see that temp now, oh, it's not printing it. And then you can also sort it. So now it makes them alphabetical. And you can see how many grapes I appended there. Oops, didn't mean to do that many times. Alright, moving on. Slicing. This is taking an array or a list of items and shrinking it down to a sublist. So in this case, the colors list, we're going from the 0th item to the 2nd item. So we're going to go from 0, 1, 2. So let's first define this. I'm sorry, but it's not inclusive of the last one. So this actually goes from 0 to 1 because it is 0, 1. This is the second one. It does not include. So the ending side does not get counted. So here we have blue and red as our sublist, which you can easily do any subset that you want to do. So you're going to go from 1 to 5. It actually gives you 4 items. And it starts at the second one because this is 0, so this will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it should go all the way to the end, and it does. Now this syntax says we're starting at the index 1, going to the index 5, and we're counting by 2s. So starting at the index 1, going to the index 5, we're going to count by 2. So we're going to go from 1, skip 1, black, skip 1, go to the next one. That's past our end, so we only end up with red and black on our list. So that's the weird syntax for slicing a list. If you have, if you separate it by a single item without any colons, it's going to give you that indexed item. If you use a colon and put another, it's going to go from this index to 1 minus the second index. So this should be the same thing. Should give us just blue, okay? Which is, and then if you add a colon, so let's go to 5. And then you can, it's going to go by 1s by default, right? So if I do this, it gives you the whole list. But if I want to do just the even ones, I can do it by 2. And you say it's going to go here, skip the red, go to green, skip black, go to white. So that's going over the list by 2s. You can go by any number you want, so you can go by 3s. So you're going to start 0, skip, skip black, skip up past the end, so it stops. So that's the index for slicing. All the way up to here we're at. Okay, so now if you ignore the number to begin with, what it does is it assumes that you meant the starting index. So this is the equivalent of writing that. So if you skip it, it means start at the beginning and go to the end of 3. This says start at 0 and go to the entire list, but not inclusive of the last one. So that should go through everything except for the last element because the ending one is not included. So this can slice backwards just like it can before in front, and this is just dead code. And so that is all we need to understand for iterables for this class. More videos to follow shortly.